Eric Sundergaard with Armstrong. I'm the Architectural Specialties Installation Manager. Today we're going to talk about the installation of a WOODWORKS Linear Veneered panels. So basically, the panels either come 2 foot by 8 foot in size. There's different reveals. So if you use the 4-inch wide plank, it's a 3/4 reveal. A 6-inch wide plank or tapered would be 1/4 inch reveals. Something to keep in mind if you're doing your installs on the size of those reveals. The other thing is that these panels will hang 2 7/8 of an inch below the face of the grid. Right here is a sample of one of the cut panels that we're going to be installing on my 3'4" wide mock-up. So this panel's been cut 3'4" wide out of a full panel. One thing to note is these hooks, these are aluminum hooks that get screw attached to the back side of these panels. Now, I removed this already, that's why the holes look bigger, but there are pre-drilled holes on the back of this to indicate where these go. So just by placing that over the holes, using a special wood screw. This is a serrated wood screw. This is what the product's been tested with, so these are the screws that are needed for installation of this product. Okay, so I think we got the panel down. Next, let's go to the grid suspension system. So since there's some weight to this panel, we definitely have to use a heavy-duty grid suspension system with this. 15/16 Prelude grid. This is our 360 Prelude grid. So this is actually painted all around, so when you're looking up through reveals, you're not going to see any of the shininess of the grid. So you have the option to use this, or you can actually use a black capped Prelude grid. The other product up here is an SH12 support hanger. When you're using this, since your mains are going every 2 foot on center, that means your wire module is 2 foot by 4 foot. If you use the support hanger, you can actually put your wires back to 4 foot by 4 foot modules. So the support hanger is going to be carrying the mains through the support hanger, but wires will be every 4 foot on the support hanger. Okay, so just a little explanation of what's going on here. This is separate ceiling mock-ups here. So just like the mock-up that's over here, there's another separate one going here, which would be our solid wood linear, and then this is the linear panel. So I just have it connected here just to kind of keep it square instead of putting kickers up to the deck to hold this one where I need it to. So that's why this is all connected here, but we're only going to be working on this portion of it. So you can, for perimeter trim options, straight or curved, you can always use our inverted vector axiom. So this is actually being attached here with an ATC clip, adjustable trim clip. So I'm able to raise that grid up 2 7/8 of an inch above the axiom in order for the face of the panel to rest on the axiom. So this is my first cut panel at the wall that I'm going to be putting on. As you can tell, it is a cut panel. I was just able to cut the backers and not have to rip the panel, so it wasn't too bad to make this cut. I also had to shift my clips over. So before cutting your panel, you may want to make some straight lines connecting the dots of the pre-drilled holes. So if you do have to move the clip over, it's a lot easier to mark this out, or you can use a framing square or something to establish the marks on your cut side to get the location for your other hooks. So this is going to fit up into the grid. The reason why you're using mains 2 foot on center is these hooks are always going to hook over the mains. They should never hook on a cross tee. The cross tees are going to be butting up against here to keep the panels all in line. So creating a 2x2 module with your mains 2 feet on center are important with this. Basically just raising it up, hooking it over the main, and resting it. Now that the weight of this panel exceeds 2.5 pounds per square foot, we need to put some safety cables up there. And a lot of this is so when maintenance guys or whoever after the fact is taking these ceiling panels down and they're not realizing how heavy they are, if they end up falling, they're going to be caught by the safety cables so they don't end up hitting somebody or hitting the ground and being damaged. When you're putting these safety cables on, you want to make sure you get it around the actual framing member. So always try to loop it around the main, but avoid the hooks. And you're gonna feed it around the main like this into each other. And then you're gonna take this hook, you're gonna attach it. So when you are installing 2x8 panels, it's definitely a two-person job. These are smaller, so I can handle installing these without a problem. Typically you want a two-person actually installing these. Just loop it around the main, like so. Then you want these in opposite corners of the panel. So we'll put one in on this hook, and we'll do one on that hook. Whenever you're installing these, the hooks are always going to go toward the wall. So you think about it, you really can't do more or anything less than a one panel install because you need room for this hook to engage. If you wanted to do this in a corridor, you would almost have to leave a 2-inch gap on both sides of the corridor in order to engage the hook. One side to engage it, the other side for visual. So you really need at least a 2-panel wide room in order for this to work easy enough for you. So let's talk about infill options. I always have to talk about this just because a lot of people want to use this, but when you have the openness through the reveals, this shininess of this bag is going to show. So we highly recommend the bioacoustical infill pad for this with the flat matte finish. A couple things to keep in mind: wood. What happens with wood? You have expansion and contraction. So I don't know how many times I tell you that I have guys on the job site that actually hang meters on their gang box that records the humidity every 15-20 minutes. A lot of times during the day, the humidity levels are fine, but what's happening at nights at the weekends? This product needs to be 25 to 55% relative humidity in order for it to perform properly. If you don't, you're going to have bigger expansion or bigger contraction that's going to cause issues with the ceiling. Thank you for watching this video. To learn more about WOODWORKS products from Armstrong, please visit armstrongceilings.com/woodworks.